So, guys, one of the things that we'll just kind of be discussing is, the state of the cannabis market, right? This is a question, obviously, as you know me as a local weed street, is one of those questions that I get very, very often. Okay. When is it time? Is it the bottom? When should I take profit? What do you think about this company? What are the catalysts coming? How is safe banking going to impact the US market? Will that impact the Canadian market? And we just kind of go from there. Now, the reason that I'm bringing Todd on is he understands some of this high level, these high level catalysts, better than most. And even though we don't share specific trade ideas, he is one of the most knowledgeable people that is out there. So I think it's useful to get another opinion, because he's more of a long-term holder in these things. And whereas, I'm more of a long-term swing trader. So, I hope you guys enjoy this. And we'll see. Let's wait for Todd to jump on. And I'm going to pause. All right. Todd Harrison.
Oh, now I can hear you. You can hear me?
Okay. I think it was because I had it mute. There you go. I should wear my True Leaf hat.
My wife said, you can't do a Zoomcast with a hat on. You look like a homeless person. I said, honey.
I think we all look like, I'm giving myself haircuts myself,
I got to get the sound up here. Hold on a second.
All right.
Do that. Audio settings. Here we go. Better.
All right. All right. So, how you been?
I've been okay. Everybody's healthy. Oh, MedMen, 45.9. MedMen. One day I'll tell you the story about when I met those guys back before this whole thing started. I've always said you could tell a lot about a person, how they act when they don't think anybody's watching.
I'd be happy to tell you why I have such a beef with Bierman.
Yeah, he's bad people, but we can keep this we can keep this positive. Positive.
Yeah, for sure. So, look, one of the reasons that I wanted to get you on here, so you're my first Zoom. So I hope that just shows you the amount of mutual respect. You're number one, baby.
All right.
But, look, that I pretty much exited Potstocks last March. And it wasn't because I was bearish. You've been trading these long enough to know that there's a seasonality to them.
Mm-hmm.
And in just kind of keeping with that seasonality, it's usually I get out in March and then I trade it and then I'm loading up in the summer. Summer never happened, right? We just had a bunch of different calamities. We had Bruce Linton leaving. We had CanTrust. We had all the bankers basically shutting off all the money. And, we had things where we were hopeful that we hit a bottom and then, Aurora blows their earnings, their own guidance, and it just sinks everything. Everything goes.
It was beyond, I don't even know if we're recording yet or not. Or
yeah, we're recording.
Okay, good. I think it was beyond that also. I think Pershing pulling the plug on custodying assets for cannabis related securities in the fall really was sort of the nail in the coffin for for that space for a while, where you couldn't buy securities, you can only sell them. And we found a solution. We found a workaround that actually worked really well, but I think we were the only ones. The space continued, and then sure enough, you saw into March with COVID, all of the reasons I think the market fell apart. Cannabis too, took it on the chin. It's just interesting. I always like to know what you're doing, because I think you have a really good handle on the space. But it was interesting to watch what started to feel like a progression that could well put that, the end to the cyclical bear within the secular bull, right? If you're looking at it, or at least how we're looking at it, that 1.0 was Canadian cultivation, 2.0 it will be US-led CPG, 3.0 will be efficacy-driven solutions. Presumably, on the back half of 1.0, when the market went from tell me to show me, much like why the dot-com bubble in, the back, right after, Y2K, money dried up and it was one thing after another, where you could throw the vaping crisis in there, you could throw purging in there, you could throw the capital constraints in there, and really just no light at the end of the tunnel that anybody could really point at. But I think COVID is, paradoxically something that has really refocused people's attention on the space, which has led to a series of progressions, which I'm happy to talk through with you. That this is what I see, and where you stand as a function of where you sit, 2 years later, from January 2018 through March of 2020, the global cannabis index down 90.2%, or 92%, even worse. They took their pound of flesh.
Yeah, they definitely did. And, this March definitely felt a lot different, because it was one of those situations where I was like, well, how much lower can they go? Are they going to go another 30% from here? And, like you were saying, coronavirus actually gave cannabis good headlines for once. People loading up on weed, whether it's in the United States or in Canada. Different systems like people, curbside checkout for weed.
Mm-hmm.
And, we saw that, with companies outside of cannabis, right? All the companies that are crushing it now, like Chipotle or Domino's or Papa John's, whatever, were the ones, Dunkin' Donuts, that had that delivery, like curbside appeal, like right there, ready and already implemented. And then we got that headline, what was it, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, that coronavirus. And I thought it was funny. Coronavirus helps cure or like prevents a certain protein from, or cannabis prevents a certain protein from, like, something to do with coronavirus.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a progression, Jason. Like I looked at it, kind of a 5-point plan, and I'll tell you the context matters, right? The 92% 2-year decline, and that is a backdrop. I'll tell you, we haven't been able to borrow a share for Canadian majors or even U.S. majors that had a nice run. We couldn't find a share anywhere in the street for the better part of May, and that really started, us thinking like, wow, after a 90% decline, maybe not so much after that bounce off the March lows, but still you've had the shorts, all over these things, and still. So what, that in and of itself doesn't start a rally, but what did? So I think a couple of things. One, you had the essential status, which is states, which sort of, put it out there. But when the House put the safe banking provision in their version of corona relief, certainly that also, I think, planted that seed for the shorts and started that process of unwinding. And, you can point to all the reasons why that makes sense traditionally, or the 34 attorneys generals from bipartisan, from both sides of the aisle that supported it, or even, looking at it through the lens of tax revenue and job growth, while these state budgets are all getting decimated from the lockdown. But you could also add now that coronavirus is actually a transmission mechanism, or cash, I should say, is a transmission mechanism for corona, which I think is a different element to the conversation from what we hear, a prominent element to the conversation. That remains to be seen.
Yeah.
But as that was digesting, you had Curaleaf, Green Thumb, Trulieve post $100 million
Crazy
quarters,
numbers.
right?
Yeah.
And you had, which was, I think, impressive given the operating environment, but also impressive that we've been looking at 2020 as a back half loaded, a year for 2 years now, waiting for this year for the scale to come. So all of that sort of was happening as the story, as the narrative started to shift. the New York, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, Tennessee governors all coming out talking about how they need cannabis now to help repair their broken balance sheets. And then, as you
100%.
alluded to, the story about how cannabis could help block the cells that transmit coronavirus. Everybody, including you and others on Twitter, I saw said, isn't that silly? Right? Like, we have some pretty smart people on our advisory board. They have not poo-pooed this, right? Preclinical stuff, long way to go. But there's there in terms of, I call it the efficacious agility, call it wellness properties, call it, cannabis as a treasure trove of API. There is there as an anti-inflammatory, and that how that could potentially help in this fight. Whether or not it's true, I don't know. It'll take a long time to figure it out, but it did reframe the conversation from vice to wellness again. And then finally, the last element, and then I'll stop talking, is all of this sort of, improve the charts. And all of these shorts are still in these names. All of a sudden, you have Curaleaf, Trulieve, Green Thumb, extended, sure, in the short term, but all through their 200 days. A lot of the Canadians through their downtrend. And so that begins to self-fulfill. All cyclical bull markets start with short covering. So, do I think that the end of the bear is behind us? I do. Does that mean it's going to be linear? Certainly not.
Probably not.
But I do think that all the things that cannabis bulls have been talking about for a long time are being brought to the fore because of coronavirus.
Yeah, I mean, it's become, and I said this in 2018, right before C-45 got put into effect, that, now it becomes an execution game for the Canadians, and they've only got a couple quarters to prove it. And that there is going to be this shift to the US market. And just the same way in 2014 that the US market propped up the Canadian market, and then we flipped in 2016. Well, now we're shifting back to the MSOs. The thing that's interesting to me, and because for the most part, I've pretty much given up on the Canadian companies, not because I don't like all of them, but mainly because we need a lot of things to line up. We need Europe, which is where they spend tons of money to finally like open the doors properly. But really, like, what I want to see, and where coronavirus kind of threw a wrench into it, is the opening of dispensaries, and then them having a marketplace to coincide with these projections that they made, years ago when we were still talking about funded capacity. But at the same time, one thing that has kind of remained, and you see me say this on Twitter all the time, it's like, look, you fade these pops until they don't work. Anytime since last March that cannabis stock has gone at least over 10%, 95% of the time, or 100% of the time, it's given it back. And it's not an elevator down, but the thing that I want to do is to just kind of like create some kind of continuity in the market that, look, retail investors have to put a little bit of this downtrend in the market in the last year on their shoulders. And the reason being is they didn't take profit. They were riding things up. They were letting all the bankers take all the money. And then when something did need bid support, they just didn't have the funds to do it. And we just blew through all of those levels. And that, I think, is one of the things that's really lacking in the space. I mean, look, if I could have it my way, I would chew down the entire sector to like 30 to 50 companies. I mean, that would be great. I want to get your take on, some of the Canadian companies like the Cronoses and Cannabis, I don't know what your positions are, but, and you don't have to share, but, what do you kind of see as like Canada's biggest hurdle? The thing that look, I don't think Canopy's going to $50. I don't think Cronos is going to $20 anytime soon. I don't even know, is Cronos even pivoting to something else? They basically just trade it cash.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, I listen, certainly we have not been a big fan of Canada for a long time. We actually a few weeks ago rotated some money back into Canada. Not necessarily going after the biggest players, and you know this, for by hook or by crook, we think Village Farms is the cat's meow. And I know you make fun of me because we love Village Farms, but we just look at it, not as necessarily a Canadian play, but also it has that U.S. optionality, has that Mexico optionality, and they got just a tremendous distribution network through their grocery relationships and through their produce relationships, and they're backing into a brand when the FDA deems it to be the time. So I think they're doing a lot of things smart. But we did buy some of the large cap for the trade into Canopy earnings on Friday. I don't know when this will post to your audience, but we thought that there was a trade into Canopy earnings. And as you see, it's sort of dancing at that 200-day right now.
Yeah.
If that can get through, it's another technical shot in the arm for the space. Say what you will. We actually listen, we started the Canopy the Canopy long, into the weakness, more looking out toward the sleep trials, right? Thinking that when those sleep trial results come out, that could reframe the conversation a bit from necessarily farmer to, a bit of a biotech and drag conversation for some of the larger LPs. And we think, Canopy certainly has that ability. I thought that the Constellation deal was brilliant, and obviously the price was telling me I was wrong for a long time. But at the time, the thought process was that they are now diversifying their revenue streams from away from just beverage to you have nutraceuticals, you have beverages, you have edibles, you have biotech at some level. But that obviously has taken a long time to play out, the regulatory hurdles, and of course banking, from the US side, in Canopy having that, that acreage deal, which we won't talk about, but also, they have a relationship with TerraSend, which we actually like a lot. And some others. So we think there's going to be survivors. But, the thing to remember, at least for us, and Josh Felker, who works with us, is great at reminding us of this, is, you can get Canopy's revenues at 60%, 60% cheaper through Curaleaf. You can get it, at 60% of the valuation with Curaleaf. You can get it at 40% of the valuation with GTI, and you can get Canopy's revenues at 20% of the valuation with Trulieve, right? And for all the regulatory arbitrages and for everybody who wants to play Canada, to have that sort of access to the world, we would rather play US to have that access to the states over time. But, when we talk about how we added, Canada, let's talk about maybe, we added 15% target. We probably put in about 2/3 of that. But as this rally starts to get, into Canopy earnings, we're going to take some off, keep some calls and a few of these things as upside hedges, maybe short some stock against select players, but really trading Canada and investing in US and starting to look at South America and rotate it a little bit back into Australia too in the last couple of weeks.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, I won't play any Canadian pot stock into earnings. When I get questions like, people were like, hey, I'm buying 650 calls like into Kronos earnings. I'm like, it's not even 550, right? I'm like, are you crazy? I'm like, you really think it's going to be this upside move? I don't see it. Yeah, I mean, we're on the same page. Like, Canada is a trade. And I look at it a little bit simpler. If I have to pick, gun to my head where to put my money, I'm going the place with the bigger population and catalysts that have yet to bear fruit. Schedule 1, safe banking, maybe federal legalization. I mean, people always ask me why I'm like, I don't want federal legalization yet. And it's true, because I don't. Obviously I think it needs to be in steps, but, right now, before legalization, is really a time to, be a speculator, right? And I love being a speculator. So, one of the things, like, I love True Leaf. I love Cure Leaf. I love Green Thumb. You know, those are my top three. You know,
I think those are everybody's top three, but
yeah, and
you know, but they're not, you know, they're extended. You know, when the RSIs get over 80, 85, it's paid to take a step back. Like I'd love to. I mean, we have positions in those three, you know, but not full positions here. You know, I'd love to buy Green Thumb at 11. I'd love to buy. You know, we bought some Cura back when I retested the 200-day at, you know, a little bit under 8. I think it was 776 at the time. You know, and certainly Truly, you know, down at 14. Although that inverse head and shoulders probably works to 22 first. They're not going down, they're flagging. It'll be interesting to see if Cresco, which is sort of making its play as the fourth horseman, potentially. Yeah. And I'm not counting GW because I think GW is in a class by itself. And, you know, and I still think it's a $350 stock dressed as a $130 stock when people understand the efficacious agility of cannabinoid wellness.
Or the IP that they hold.
Oh my gosh. But Cresco, listen, Cresco puts up a big number tomorrow, you know, coming from Illinois. You know, it's possible. I don't know if it has the wow factor of maybe GTI or Cure or Truly, but they're probably in you know, the best position to assume that fourth spot in the fangification of U.S. cannabis. You know, I think, and this is going to sound super weird coming from where we came in the last 2 years, but I tell my team, I said, listen, you know, we trade these things and we trade around cores, but above the 200-day moving average, I think the biggest risk is selling these positions, because when this is not a fade, as you said, over the last couple of years, every tick has been a fade. Yes, it was a cyclical bear market. We hit an all-time low in global cannabis in March, an all-time low in March. You know, so, you know, yes, we can continue to kind of slog around, and certainly you want to avoid the quantity and focus on the quality, because there's going to be a lot of Potstocks. There's going to be a lot of, you know, also rans that don't make it. But the ones that do, you know, are the ones that you just got to hold on and not, you know, be as concerned with as these things get a little overheated on the RSI, but just, you know, looser grips on the handlebars as these things start to turn that technical corner.
Yeah, and I 100% as a trader agree, because, and I tell people all the time, it's tougher. It's getting tougher and tougher to short Potstocks. You know, whether you're just going short or you're buying puts. You know, puts aren't paying you, and if they pay you, you've got to be lightning.
Right, the fast and the dead.
Yeah, and you know, and I find, like, if I'm in puts sometimes for less than 20 minutes. You know, calls are, I'm in, you know, I'll hold those overnight because I already know that there's demand. Like, we understand the psychology of, like, the cannabis trader, you know, and nobody wants to miss out. So, you know, the thing with, like, True Leaf and Cure Leaf, I think what Cure Leaf adds, I think about 16 million every quarter to their outstanding. You know, I think they've got one July 1st.
You're talking about the unlock.
Yeah, the unlocks.
Yeah, you know, but it's also Boris isn't selling, you know, and like
look, it's a different beast than some of the other companies that aren't doing revenue, you know?
Correct.
You know, I think if anything, people will buy the dip. The only unlock that really scares me is True Leaf.
Yep.
And
you know, we talked to Kim. She's great, by the way. You know, but if you believe, like, listen, this is, you know, when I saw Cantor put like a $68 price target on True Leaf today. If I'm not, I got to look at that again. Canadian 68. But let me just double check that because we're filming this. 68.94 price target. Cantor Fitzgerald on True Leaf on the Canadian kind. Yeah, the thing with True Leaf, and I get it, but you see the short interest. These things all still trade crowded, in my opinion, just tape watching. But the other thing with True Leaf is, if you really follow the science, as we try to stay true to, follow the science. You know, Florida is going to be the cannabinoid wellness capital of the world, with the elderly population and the
1,000,000%.
3.5 time prescription average. And the older you get, the toner your cannabinoid system changes. these, the cannabinoids in cannabis supplement your body's natural processes, as they say up in Canada. So we think Florida is awesome, and truly it is really the queen or king, queen, crown of Florida. But yes, the unlock is scary, but I've always hated to trade invisible catalysts, right? Like I know a lot of people, I mean, listen, I'm not going to lie. We sold a bunch of Trulieve, into the number because it would have to be pretty spectacular to go up. And it hasn't gone up. It's sort of been sideways since the report. So we've been nibbling back because, hey, we don't want to be, try to catch this thing for $3 or $4 of scalping when we think there's probably a double or a triple in the future. So that's what we're trying to manage. And then, oh, by the way, you have this other crazy thing, the system formerly known as capitalism, which is just, just some kind of disconnected from the real economy on the other side of the equation that, who knows, how long that will last. Now we've come so far so fast.
Yeah. And that worries me. And that worries me going into this unlock. Well, one, that they're going to basically be doubling the share count, right? I think they're at, are they at 45 million now? They had 11.2 unlock on the 25th of May. And then they have another, it's either 45 or 55, July 25th. And I told Kim this last summer when she delayed that unlock. She sent me a message. She's like, I know you're unhappy with it. And I am unhappy with it because they were always going to put up really good numbers. And I was just like, pull the Band-Aid off while you're down here. It gives people the opportunity to get in. It's going to turn this thing into a cult stock, and you've got time to grow into it. Versus you do it now, obviously you can't see that there's this pandemic going on. And we don't know if there's going to be a second wave. And a second wave takes everything back down because the Fed isn't going to be able to just go unlimited money gun, while there's 35 million people unemployed, 1.4 trillion in auto debt, 1.4 trillion student loan debt, 1.3 trillion auto debt, 1.1 trillion credit card debt, and on and on and on and on.
Well, how can there not be a second wave? I mean, there are models of things like this. And I mean, I told my kid, we have twin 16s on top of our 9-year-old, and I said to them, listen, don't make decisions because you're frustrated. Everybody's frustrated. They want to go out and party, but like you make stupid decisions when you're frustrated. And I really hope that a year from now they make fun of me and they say, you were too nervous, you were too cautious. And I'll say, yes, you know what? And I would be the happiest father.
I'm a dad. That's what I do.
Right. I would be the happiest dad in the world if you look back and say I was too cautious. I don't see it. I mean, history rhymes, and we'll see listen, I do think, that the parallels between what we're going through now and what the country went through in the 30s, with the Depression, the parallels with the repeal of Prohibition are so profoundly spot on. Like, how does it not happen, right? How does it not happen?
How does it not happen when cannabis jobs have been outpacing all manufacturing jobs
That's right.
for the last couple of years? And now we had an issue with states losing industry for the last couple of years. If you were a coal miner, if you were, like somebody that worked in a steel mill or, a lot of blue collar jobs. Cannabis is a completely new industry that the United States can dominate. We've got the population. I mean, if we went federally legal tomorrow, the Canadian industry would blow up. I mean, they'd get a little pop, but for the most part, we're stealing market share from them everywhere.
And I always talk about the four-sided arbitrage here. You get time, price, perception, and liquidity. Just without getting too far in the weeds, but certainly, all of the institutional money, is on hold. I speak to, CIOs at major banks, and they tell me they want to be the first, second mover into the space. The American Bankers Association is all over Crapo to push this through. We think it does get through. I don't know when, and I don't know what that banking language looks like, but the ABA is a pretty powerful lobby. This coronavirus transmits on cash. 34 attorney generals are on board. It just, the time is now. Not that you could ever confuse logic with political process. but it seems like there's a political will and a societal need to get this through from a health standpoint, but also follow the money. If global cannabis is, call it a $300 billion global market, and everybody's talking about how price of cannabis is coming down, and sure, the price of cannabis is coming down, which is really good if, for 2.0, if you use cannabis as an ingredient. If cannabis prices are going down, input costs are going down, margins are going up, it's accretive. And then everything that we're talking about in these different form factors, these different applications, whether it's for sports, whether it's for pets, whether it's, it all starts to come out in the wash, and that 300 billion, I think, could translate into a much bigger number. But you know me, I've been, it's weird. Anybody who knows me has always kind of looked at me as more bearish than bullish. I've been bullish cannabis. I was too bullish cannabis. I was a little early on cannabis, but just like the tech crash, the .com boom and bust, everything they said that technology was going to be happened, but not without a spectacular crash first. I think it's a carbon copy script.
You got to break a few eggs to make an omelet. We need to break a lot of eggs in this sector. So, what do you think? One company that people should be keeping an eye on?
I think if you really want to look at, at 5 stocks in no particular order, I think it's got to be, in no particular order, Curaleaf, Green Thumb, Trulieve, GW, and I'll throw Cresco in there just because I think that they could play a little catch up. If they can get over their 200-day, which is within kitten's whisker right now, then you're talking about the 4 horsemen above their 200-day, if indeed this is the 4th horseman. And you can, have some defined risk and really, try to go for a ride in this sector. But, there are, again, and I've been trying to be pretty clear on this on Twitter, when you have these names like, Village, which is my favorite Canadian name, went from 280 to 6 in 7 trading sessions, right? Up 100, it was up 100, actually at one point 125% when it was trading in Canada on Monday. So I don't think like the risk is that they're just going to rip to the upside and you're not going to be able to get involved. But I do think that on pullbacks too, where you can define your risk, you find these names. I'll throw Village in there too as a name in Canada that I want to stay with because I think that they're just the tip of the iceberg what they're doing in Canada versus what they could do with the rest of the world with their distribution network when that time comes.
Fair enough. I agree with all those. I wouldn't throw Cresco Labs in there, not because I don't like them. I just
they got to put up a big number, and I think their balance sheets maybe a step below where these other guys are. But again, and then we're not even talking about the whole like second tier that are more sort of have a higher delta or more gamma, I should say, to a potential banking solution that will lower the cost of capital for these guys and introduce debt financing to the U.S. side of the equation. And that's like the Harveys of the world and a number of others that I think have probably more optionality to a safe banking. But, there's some good names out there. TerraSend is a good name. I know that's a name that you've, talked about in the past. Columbia Care is pretty cheap down here.
Yep.
So there's a handful of names that have sort of got thrown out with the wash that I think if you have a 3 to 5 year horizon and a little bit of patience, which is not really your audience and it's not really my nature, but trying to adapt, for what I think is going to be the cyclical bull within the secular bull now.
Yeah, I mean, the craziest thing is that all of my 2 biggest cannabis holdings don't touch the plant, and they're in real estate. Power REIT and IIPR. Like, I couldn't say no to IIPR at 50. I got into Power REIT at like 870, and 100%. I mean, it's just been an absolute beast.
GrowGen's another one. GrowGen's killing it.
GrowGen's another one. I like that space. I really do agree with you on GW Pharma. I mean, the first time I bought GW Pharma was $32. 2013.
When people understand that this is all about getting well and not about getting high, and I know people get high, and I know that it's also about getting high. There's that whole universe, right? But I think that disconnect between perception and reality, that's where the profits are. And if people can start to look at this rather than saying, okay, well, you have CBD or you have THC, but you have CBN, you have THCV, this treasure trove of API, then there's no way that GW doesn't, doesn't benefit from that.
All right, cool. Well, thanks, Todd. We
Yeah.
should do this again. Oh, I see your sons play lacrosse.
Yeah. Well, he did. This was a big year for him. He was all set up to play varsity as a 10th grader. He was out there every day, 3 hours a day and in the gym getting big, and then he got the rug pulled. But
You should send me a video of him shooting. Does he play like midfield attack, or is he?
he's a two-handed midi. Yeah, I posted. He just dropped his fall 2019 highlights on. I dropped it on Twitter. Then he made me.
Send me a reel of him just shooting the ball, and I'll fix his shot.
Okay, well that sounds like a plan, Jason.
That's what I do, man. But anyway, it was great talking to you again. And we're going to do this again sometime.
Yeah, I would like that. And good luck to you, my friend.
Thanks. Same to you, buddy.
All right.
Bye.